Good morning. My name is Kent Coble. I'm alcoholic. Dry date 5/18/92. My sponsor is Bob D. I'm a member of the Venice Group of Alcoholics Anonymous in Sandusky, Ohio. I was raised right. I always say if my mother was here, she'd get up and say, you ain't turned out right. But anyway, I want to thank the committee for the invitation. I honor the privilege of participating at any level in the life-giving, life-saving, life-changing fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Is an honor and a privilege, and I want to thank you for having me here and having my sponsor here. And it's just sometimes it's hard to put into words. I rode over here with Cindy and from the hotel, and we were talking, and it's like, what a gift we've been given here. And sometimes I lack the words to be able to express it, so I use the ones that my grandmother gave me. Thank you. Cindy left us off last night with step 3, which she shared with us so beautifully about. Step 3 is about a decision. You know, every morning I make a decision to go to work. I make that decision laying in bed. That decision does not Star Trek teleport me to work. After I make the decision, some things have to take place, right? And for a guy like me, right, I start out when on awakening, I start praying, right? Because I'm one of them people that between, like, I need to start right now. Because my head starts as soon as I wake up. Anybody know what I'm talking about, right? And I can sabotage my day before my feet hit the floor. I am fully capable of doing that. But I do all that and, take my shower, get dressed, get my briefcase, get my laptop, right? I get in the car and I drive to work. In order for any decision to bear fruit in my life, it has to be followed by some action. The third step is a promise to submit to the rest of the process. What turns my will in my life over to the care of God is the remaining steps. It's a lot of people in here at 9 o'clock in the morning. Tom and I used to say, in the morning we do workshops, this is for the hungry and the hardy. It's a lot of hungry people in Toronto. But so any decision, right, must be followed by some action, right? And so it says we at once commence on this personal inventory, right? So I get that question a lot, like, when do you start your inventory? Read the book. Black print, white page, blue book, at once. At once. After the third step, which, I made way more out of that than it had to be, I was exhausted. I thought, a couple of week rest and then we'll start on this inventory, and I was not sponsored by people who think like that. At once. How long you give somebody to do it? I told y'all last night my grand sponsor was Neil Craven in Cleveland. Neil was sponsored by Dr. Bob. I asked Neil, how long did Dr. Bob give you to write an inventory? He told me about 2.5 hours. He wrote his inventory in what is now Smitty's room in Dr. Bob's house. And what Dr. Bob told him is, this is what I want you to write. I want you to get on your knees and pray before you write anything. And then I want you to get up. This is what I want you to write. What I want is what's here, right now. Sometimes we turn these steps into an obstacle course. Now, I sponsor a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is a privilege to do so. And one, like, I got this guy, and it's been 3 weeks. No. See, when I give you 4-step directions, I tell you when it's to be done and when the 5th step is going to be. I don't leave that open. Now, I will take into consideration your schedule. Right? So if you're working 7 days a week, take care. I get that, right? You're going to get a little bit more time. If you're in the halfway house, no, you're not getting that kind of time. Right? And if you're not willing to get it, then you need to go find somebody else, because I sponsor people in recovery. I don't preside over their disruption. You can do that by yourself. And see, that's how I was raised in AA. I spoke at a meeting in Cleveland, and the guy introduced me. He said, our speaker is AA fundamentalist Kent Coleman. I was insulted by that. didn't know what it meant, right? I asked my sponsor, what does that mean? He said, it's that you believe in doing it the way they did it when it started. And I said, I guess that's all right too. The book says taking a commercial inventory is like taking a commercial inventory. It's a fact finding and a fact facing process. I was talking to Butch before me. I'm a buyer. I worked for Ford Motor Company for 30 years buying. And today I work for a company based out of Omaha. And I buy raw materials from every continent on earth. And I love my job. I love what I do. And much of what I do and have done for the last 35 years is based on inventory. I need to know how much we got. Every day when I go to work, the first thing I do is run spreadsheets and I look at the inventory. And when I say every day, I mean every day. I ain't do it today because I didn't bring my laptop, but tomorrow morning I will be home and the first thing I do when I sit down at that laptop is I will run the inventories. I need to know truthfully what I have so that I can procure correctly. I always use the example, right? It's a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. An effort to discover the truth, circle the word truth, about the stock and trade, right? One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, get rid of them promptly and without regret. Every year, we did it in December. We shut the doors, we turned the system off, nothing coming in, nothing coming out, and we count everything in our factories and our buildings. Everything, top to bottom. We want to identify what we can sell, what we can use, right? We want to identify what's not saleable, what's not usable, so we can get rid of it, so we have room to bring in more that we can sell, right? So it's really pretty simple. I always use the example of a Best Buy. If I own a Best Buy and the white truck pulls up, I call it the God truck, it's full of all the good new stuff, all the stuff that you want, right? The new iPhones, the new Androids, the new laptop, whatever it is, the Wave TVs, whatever they got now, right? And it pulls up. Okay, Kent, we want to fill your store with the good stuff. But first, you ain't got no room in here. So we need to take a look in your store and see what needs to go that has no value so we can put the good stuff in. So you come into my Best Buy, I got 8 tracks. I got reels, I got VCRs, the Betamax, right? You look around my store and you say, Ken, don't nobody want this stuff, it has no value. And my first response is gonna be this, but it's mine. It works for me, right? I immediately want to defend the lie. So this is about, right, every step gives me what I need for the following steps. What is the requirement for applying any step to my life that I've done the ones that come before it? By the time I get to step 4, there's 3 steps that have already been applied, right? Honesty is the principle of the first step. Thank God for that, right? Because I'm going to need that in step 4. So I want to start getting down to the truth about some things. Now, I am not going to do what we would do in a workshop, get a chalkboard out, start drawing lines and do it. I don't have time for that. So I'm not going to focus so much on that aspect of it as I am the spiritual aspect of it and what it has done and is doing for me in my daily life. But there's 3 sections that we do our writing on, and that's resentment, fear, and then the sex inventory, which ain't really that much about sex, it's more about selfishness in relationships. So I want to share this with you, right? I was going to meetings, going to conferences and events, and I started to see stuff. I started to see tables with workbooks on them. Step 3 workbook, step 4 workbook. You ever see those, right? So I said to my sponsor, like, should I look at some of that? Bad question. And this is what he told me. He said, this is the only successful treatment for alcoholism in the last 5,000 years of recorded history. And there's a lot of people that want to put their thumbprint on this. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. He would launch into those, right? He said, we read the black print on the white page in the blue book and we do what it says. And so I went home and threw away all the workbooks I had. If I come to your house and you give me a piece of cake, and I eat that cake and I say, that is the best cake I've ever had in my life, would you give me the recipe, please? You give me the recipe and you say, Kent, if you follow this recipe exactly as it's written, you will get this same cake. I take the recipe home and it calls for 3 eggs. Well, I think that's a little light. Let's put 6. 2 cups of flour? Man, that's a lot of flour. Let's just put 1. Right? And I don't get the same cake. If you alter the content, you will alter the finished product. So I don't need to add, subtract, nothing. People start talking about, well, is there 3 columns or 4 columns? Hey, let's waste the whole meeting talking about that. While we got new people in here who are trying to learn how to stay sober, who need help, but we're going to debate for an hour whether there's 3 columns or 4. Frankly, I could care less how many columns you use. What I care about is the content. Is all of the information that the book asks for in your inventory. Thank you. That's all I need to know. So I'm not married to format, I'm married to content. So we start with resentments. Now, I always have said, right, the first 2 columns, I've been doing them all my life. They was easy, because I know who I'm mad at and I know why I'm mad at you. Right? As a matter of fact, I think about it every single day. My nickname when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, my nickname in the street was Poison. I ain't a nice guy, and I'm not Poison anymore. That's who I was, and ain't who I am. But I'm a guy who engenders hatred. I don't dislike people. I hate people. And without a spiritual experience, I'm gonna tell you, it's a well-known fact. I came to AA and went to 300 meetings in 3 months and tried to kill a guy at work. That's what I look like. Going to meetings, no steps, no relationship with God. That's what I look like. You take booze away from me, dude, it's going somewhere else. So I know them first 2 columns, right? We work down in the columns. We don't work across. Very important. Follow the directions in the book. We list it. When you list, you go down. I asked my sponsor, well, why can't you just go across? He said, well, take a look at Mr. Brown. So I said, okay, how about Mr. Brown? I got his name here, I'm gonna work across. What's the cause? His attention to my wife, told my wife I got a mistress and he might get my job at the office. What does that affect? My sex relations, self-esteem, fear, security, personal relationship. I don't know about you, but if I'm working across, by the time I get done with that, I don't know who number 2 is because I'm going to look for Mr. Brown. When I wrote my first inventory, I wrote it in my mother and father's family room because they had allowed me to come back and live in their home, a home from which I had rightly been banned forever for things that I had done. And they gave me a chance. My father said, it's the first time you ever tried to do something, so like we're gonna walk with you. But he said, I'm gonna tell you one thing right now. If I even suspect that you have taken a drink, buddy, you are out of here and you will never come back. And my mother was dying of cancer at that time, and my father really needed me to help. Greatest blessing in my life. But I wrote this inventory, and I did what my sponsor told me to do. I got on my knees, and I asked God to reveal to me everything that needed to go into this inventory for me to proceed into my recovery. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I got off my knees, and I made those lines on that paper, and I started on that first column, resentful act, and it just flowed. It just flowed. Then we go to the second column, which is the cause. We're working down, right? And so now, boom, they just flowed. It took me, I don't know, probably about I probably spent about 5 hours, I think, writing that day. I had already been given the date for the fifth step. And when I got done, I was done. I didn't start, well, it's got to be perfect. You know, one of the questions you get is, how many names should you have on there? Did you pray before you did it? If it's only 2 names on there, then it's 2 names on there. If it's 100 names on there, it's 100 names on there. Where do we come up with this stuff? I've had people come up to me and say, well, my sponsor said I ain't got enough names on here. I said, did you pray before you did it? Yes. This is the beginning of a lifelong process. More will be revealed. I get to talk about step 10 later today. I love that because that's the segue. This is the segue to that, right? But I sat and I wrote. And then I got to the third column, the effects mind. And I used the ones that are in the book. I didn't create any new ones. They covered it perfectly. The word fear bracketed in there. And now we start to identify the enemy. Now we start to identify the enemy, right? Fear. What's at the root of all of this, right? Bill Wilson says self-centered fear is the chief activator of all my character defects. So now I'm looking at this fear. Fear that I'm going to lose something, or fear that I'm not going to get something that I think I got to have. Sometimes that's like your respect. I had somebody on my inventory that hit me from behind with a dodgeball in like the 3rd grade. This girl, her name was Jeanette. And I character assassinated this person for the next 30 years. Because of that. Why? Because people laughed. So you don't see me the way I'm afraid that you don't respect me. I'm afraid you don't like me. I'm afraid you don't see me in the light I want you to see me. See, I start to realize how this evil and corroding thread is woven through the fabric of my existence. Now I'm starting to see some stuff, that all this stuff, this resentment, these are the faces of fear. These are the faces of fear. If you scare me bad enough, I will get angry. And you'll think, man, that's angry. I'm scared, man. I'm scared. Now, at this point, we get some direction, and I'm grateful for the sponsorship that I have had, because there's some direction that saved my life. And has changed the way that I see me. It's changed the way that I see you. It's changed the way, I call it the paradigm shift. I call it the paradigm shift. Because obviously, resentment is the #1 offender. I cannot stay sober and have, my sobriety is continued upon my relationship with God. I cannot have a relationship with God, because the God of my understanding is love, when I'm full of hate. So the book said they got to be mastered, but how? And the book doesn't ask a question without, in the next sentence or paragraph, answering the question. We turn back to the list for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. So I'm going to look at this from an angle that I have never looked at it before. This means change. This means change. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. Yeah, because it's going to block me from the sunlight of the Spirit. How can we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than we could alcohol. All right, so now it's going to tell me how. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, and here's the kicker, like ourselves, were sick too. Now I got to tell you, 95% of the resentments that I had were I was resenting the reaction of other people to things I had done. I'm the one who caused them. Okay? I had a resentment against this guy named Sam. Sam hit me in the head with a bottle of Miller's down at the bar, but I spit in his face. See, I will resent you for your reaction to my wrongdoing, and a lot of mine fell into that category. But every now and then, we run into people like us, and they the one who do something. And those are the ones I really cling to. See what he did to me? I ain't do nothing to him, right? When my sponsees come to me with that, this is what I always say. But have you ever done that to somebody? Have you ever done anything? And the answer is always the same. Yup. Okay. My entire life has been lived like this. I'm here, you here. I'm a person who judges. I judge others. So I'm here and you're here. Now, what this was our course began to do for me is I began to look at people because they like me. See, I'm seeing the truth about me. What right do I have to judge anybody over anything? I take inventory on a daily basis. I got no right to judge anybody. Number one, I've never lived a day of your life, not a second of your life. Any human being that I meet is a compilation of everything that's happened to them since they've been here. I don't know what brought you to where you are today. All I know is how am I supposed to react to it? You pull it in the grocery store, you beat somebody to a spot, they get out their car and cuss you out. They ain't cussing you out about no spot. They're cussing you out about all this stuff that they got in them. You are just a convenient dumping spot for all that frustration in their life. Check, how am I going to react? Get out and start yelling back at, you know what? Hey, I'm sorry. It's okay. You can have it. No problem. Watch how they react. I got to bring love. I got to get out of this. I move from here to here to here to here, eyeball to eyeball. I move from judgment to empathy. Dude, I get it because I've done that. How many times have I done that? How many times have I fired on somebody? I ain't talking about drunk. How many times have I fired on somebody sober because of stuff I got in me that I should have told him that I'm walking around with? Changed my life. Changed the way I react to people. And when I don't do it right, listen, the job I got, there's some pressure with it. And I don't like bad news. Sometimes people call me and they give me bad news. Like force majeure. Anybody know what that means? I mean, we ain't got no more. And you can't handle it, right? And sometimes I don't react well. Right? And I've hung up the phone. Thank God for this inventory life that we get to live in here. And I'm like, I can't talk to people like that. You already know. I call them back. And I've done this many times and said, I'm sorry, I had no right to speak to you that way. No, Ken, listen, no, no. I had no right to speak to you that way. See, this is the shift that starts to take place, and it starts to color my relationships, my character, and I start to feel better about myself. I never felt good about myself. I wasn't raised to live the way that I lived. But let me share something with you. Knowing this stuff is not enough. You can quote the book all you want. What I have learned in the last 30 years is, my first sponsor told me, I'm going to train your feet to move against your head. I'm going to train your feet to move against your head. I come home from work thinking, man, it was a long day. I am not going to the meeting. I talked to 2 or 3 sponsees today. I deserve a break. I deserve some rest, right? As I'm walking into the garage with the keys in my hand, because Bill Finley and Kenny Bombalicki trained my feet to move against my head. Dude, this the enemy. This the enemy. Thank God for good sponsorship. I had them, then I had Bob. That's all the sponsorship I have had. I've been blessed. Because I get truth. So now we got this entirely different angle. Now I'm seeing you eyeball to eyeball. Then it asked me to avoid retaliation and argument, right? Can't be helpful, right? Our primary purpose to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Now, I can go to meetings and say that because I can read. Our primary purpose is to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. I used to have to call my first sponsor every day after work. They usually make you do that like the first year. I was like 12 years sober and still calling him. And I called him one day and he said, well, what'd you do today? And I lost my mind and told him the truth. And I had cursed out an area manager that day because he said something I ain't like. And when I say I cursed him out, I'm telling you, there was 2 or 3 guys who came and got between me and him because they said they never heard that kind of language. I'm 12 years sober, Mr. A-double-A, right? And my sponsor said to me, let me ask you a question, big shot. He said, what's your purpose, man? I said, to be of maximum service to God and the people around me. He said, how the hell can you do that when nobody can stand to be in the same room with you? And he hung the phone up. Listen, the spiritual life is not a theory. I got to live it. I've been to AA meetings all over the world. I have yet to attend a meeting where somebody stand up and say, it works if you know it. One of the things that came out of the pandemic is I got a sponsee Zoom meeting. I sponsor people all over the country who never knew each other. And so it's the fellowship that has grown out of that. They've taken vacations together this summer. Guys from the West Coast, guys from the East Coast. I never saw that coming. I just did it because, Bob did it. Nobody could go nowhere, right? So I never foresaw, because you can't predict God's grace. You don't, right? We just do the next indicated right thing. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in this meeting because I sponsor a lot of guys that are sober more than 25 years, a whole bunch. I got some brand new guys in the teens and all, but it's a whole cadre of guys 25 and over. We talk very truthfully about how much of this we actually do. And we challenge each other. It's been an incredible experience. Saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will, not mine, be done. How many times you say that today? None. None. Now it asks us to do a little more writing. Referring to our list again. Now I love this. Putting out of our minds the wrong others had done. We resolutely looked for our own mistakes. This, my inventory, ain't yours. Disregard entirely. Where have we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? Okay. Now we get down to the nitty-gritty. Now we're taking a personal inventory. Now we're looking at the truth, right? One of the things that Bob had me do during the inventory was like after we got done, he was like, if the other person was writing the inventory, like what would they write about you? Because you know the answer to that, don't you? You know the answer to that. And man, that was a gut-wrenching experience. But the inventory is mine, it ain't the other person's. I can't do nothing about what happens with them, but I can do something about what happens with me. Where were we to blame? So usually the way that I do it is just, they do the 3 columns, and then like number 1 under resentment, on the separate sheet of paper, we put number 1, and then we answer those questions. So that's the way I do it. You could put another column there, it makes it easier to see, that's fine. Main thing, like I said in the beginning, is content, not format. Just that all the information get put down. Resentment inventory. A shift in spirit, a shift in perspective. It's like a whole new, man, it's like somebody raised a curtain. And I can tell you now that I am human and I am susceptible to getting angry with people. But here's what I'll say, is I've made progress. Doesn't happen as frequently, it isn't as severe. And I'm less spiritually tolerant of it. Does that make sense? I don't, because automatically if I did something that, like you had it coming, I walk away, I don't think about it no more. You had it coming. It don't sit with me no more. I'm not the same person. It's not acceptable to me anymore. Change my life. Certainly change how I react to other people and how I see others. And hopefully moves me closer to actually being able to live my primary purpose instead of going to meetings and reciting it. Fear. Evil and corroding thread, the fabric of our existence was shot through with it. So the first thing I want to say is, because I heard this a lot when down at the club, but you heard everything down at the club. Well, there's good fears. The fear of walking in front of a moving bus. That ain't fear, that's common sense. God gave me that. to preserve you. Listen, evil and corroding. How can something evil and corroding be good? If you can answer that, tell me after this meeting. Evil and corroding. That means it's progressively eating at me and eating more of me. I didn't hear this in AA, but I have heard it in AA, but the first place I heard it was from my mom. You can only operate in one or two spheres, and that's love or fear. That is it, that is all. There's not a third one. And anything that's going on with you, you can walk it back to one of those two. My mother told me that. My mother told me a lot of stuff I used to listen to. Love. Fear. So it's going to ask me to list my fears. Okay. It says the fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more problems. Stealing what? How about my life? How many things has Kent not done because of fear and justified it some other kind of way? I was coming out of school. I had an opportunity with a company that some of my classmates went to work for in Cincinnati. And I'm afraid to fail, man. And I had worked in an auto plant in the summertime, and they forgot, there was a 7-day department, they forgot, and I got in the union. I was supposed to get laid off for 89 days, and I got in the union. So I had started to, back then they used to have educational leave. I started to accumulate seniority while I'm going to school. This is kind of like they used to do in the military. They used to have that in the big three back then. And so my rationale was, I'm going to go back and I'm going to work in this plant. I'm going to make good money. Here's the deal. Why didn't I take that job? Because I was afraid to fail, man. Robbed me of a great opportunity. A lot of my friends went to work there, and they had an employee contribution program, and it was deemed illegal. At some point, they messed up how they did it, and so everybody got cashed out at a minimum of $1 million apiece. Boy, don't think I didn't look at that when that happened, right? But money notwithstanding, the reason why I didn't take that job is because I was afraid. The reason I didn't have a family is because I was afraid I couldn't meet the responsibility. And I would have gave you a million excuses. Oh, I travel light, right? I don't need all that back, right? I travel light. Yeah, I traveled so light I slept in my car. Listen, that's when I had a car. You're looking at a man that worked at Ford Motor Company who did not have a car. When I came in this fellowship, I did not have a car. It is possible. You're looking at a guy that did it. We almost get cars for nothing. I couldn't, well, I wrecked it drunk, obviously, but I can't make a payment. I watched, I'm going to talk what fear did to me. I used to say it paralyzed me, but that's a lie, because nothing ever stays the same. It either gets better or gets worse. You either move forward or you move backward. I watched the people that I grew up with, the people that I went to school with, I watched them get married, get jobs, have children, have these really neat lives as they move this way. I'm moving this way. And I was angry, and I was bitter, and I resented those people. They think they're better than me. How come I don't ever have any good luck? You ever say that? How come nothing good ever happens to me? Dude, listen, if you don't play, you can't win. And Kent don't play. Drunk Kent, he don't play. So my friends came over to the house one day. My mother looked at him and said, "Get away from him. He's going nowhere. And he'll take you with him if you let him." Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of losing, fear of not getting. When I look back, it was the basis of my resentment. And it completely, at the age of 32, when I came to y'all, I have nothing, man. I sat down with my father at the kitchen table. My father looked at me and he said, "You ain't worth a quarter." And that was literally and figurative. He said, "You ain't worth a quarter." I wasn't. I had nothing. Nothing. But that's what I did. That ain't what I do. Because I don't live like that no more. I am not afraid to take chances. I'm not afraid to participate. I'm not afraid to accept promotions at work. I was working at Ford, man. I went back to school. You know how come I never went back to school? They said you should go get an advanced degree. Ford to pay for it. You know how come I didn't? Because I was afraid I was going to fail, man. That's why I didn't do it. But I got sober. My sponsor, he started nudging me about that, and then I wouldn't do it, and he just left it alone. And then one day, you know what? I was sitting having a conversation with a cousin of mine who was not in this fellowship, same age as me, first cousin. And she was a superintendent at Ford. And I told her, I said, "You know what? I know more about how this plant works and how to build a car than all y'all management people." And she turned around and she looked at me and she said, "Kenny, you probably do. Why don't you go earn one of these jobs like the rest of us had to do?" And she turned and walked away. And I made a decision right then, I'm going to go back to school. So I go back to school, and amazing things happen if you go to school and you show up every day and you actually do what they ask you to do. Amazing things happen, right? I in school, like, I coasted. School was easy for me. I'm a schoolboy. School was easy for me. But now, you know, now it ain't. I gotta, right? And so I'm getting A's. And I was at work one day. I had a build-up job. I got done early, and I was sitting there writing the paper. And a manager walked by me, and she said, "Hey, Coleman, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm in the MBA program at Ashland." And he said, "Hey, man, I need a supervisor this summer just to cover vacations." Plant was kind of in trouble. Ford was in trouble at that time. He said, "Look good on your resume, right? It's only for 3 months." I said, "Okay." I did that job for 1 month, and they called me up front. And first thought, failed again, right? Only took a month. They see it already, right? So I go hang dogging in there, plant manager, salary personnel manager, HR director, they're all sitting there. I sat down, and the head of salary personnel looked at me and he said, "Kent," he said, "you've been doing this job for 1 month." He said, "But it is the consensus of the people in this room. It seemed like you've been doing it your whole life. Forget the 3-month thing. We want you to keep it. And here's what we're going to pay you." I took it. I looked at it. I said, "Give me a pen." Listen. And I have not looked back, man. I have not looked back. Took me places. When I left Ford, I was in Dearborn. I was sitting in a meeting when we were redesigning the Mustang. I was on the redesign the Mustang team, and I worked in fuel emission systems at that time. And I'm sitting there. We're waiting to have this meeting. We had a candy apple red Mustang sitting in the middle of the room, no stickers or markers on it, and we would look at it and discuss changes, all that. And I'm there with one engineer. And the guy turned and he looked at me and he said, Coleman, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't want you to be offended by it. He said, I got to ask you a question, man. He said, dude, where'd you come from? He said, it's like you just came out of nowhere. And I looked at him, and this is what I told him. I said, I did. And he looked at me and he said, well, we're glad you did. And that was the end of that conversation. Fear should be classed with stealing. I say this to my sponsee. What's it taking from you? How much you want to give it? Because we're putting some tools in place in these steps, right, to help us to build this relationship with this power that Cindy talked about last night. It moves to trust. And we start to step out on faith. And we start to know that if God is in your corner, any way that it turn out, it's okay. It's all right. Sometimes things don't work out because I need to learn from that so that I can move forward. Everything that you try ain't going to work out. But if you don't play, you can't win. And I don't want to live a life that I look back, I wish. I want to be in the game. When you look at what this has done, so we make this list, and then it gives us our fear prayer. Now, there's something that starts to happen in the steps. We start to get this combination here of prayer and action. Prayer and action. Every time the book says we ask God, that's prayer. Prayer, action. Prayer, action. We ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be at once we commence to outgrow fear. And I want you to know that it says what He would have us be, not what He would have us do. Because the doing will emanate from the being. This is about what's in here. Right? What He would have us be. What would God have me be in this situation? And if I don't know, I can call Bob and ask him. But generally, you know. He would have you to be kind, loving, helpful, right? Faithful and trusting in His power, because I don't have any, step one. I can't manage my own life, right? So I know what He'd have me be. And I can breathe again. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And I can breathe again, right? Fear, tolerated. Faith, contaminated. It will always knock. It'll knock. Every day it knocks. How do I respond? Because if I open the door and I let it in, this has been my experience, it will begin to permeate everything in my life. I will start to make decisions based on self-preservation, self-survival, right? I will, again, now if I'm going to do that, then I got to start to control everything around me, people, the places, the things, right? And all of a sudden, I got the chaos thing going again, right? So it's going to knock. Talk about that some more in step 10 when it starts knocking. But how do I respond? I've been given the tools. And so with the people that I sponsor, okay, they come with you. Okay, let's take a look at this. What you scared of? Okay, let's get there first. Let's get to the root of this. Okay. Talked about it in step, either God is everything or else He is nothing. God either is or isn't. What was our choice to be? Okay, so I ain't feeling it. I don't understand it. I don't see it. But that faith is not about seeing, feeling, and understanding. Faith is about, okay, God got this, and move forward. And I get direction from Bob, right? Because fear always. My 21-year-old daughter was going on a trip to Boston for her birthday. I was not for this. I called Bob. I said, Jordan's going to Boston for her birthday. I said, I ain't for it. I don't believe she should be going to no Boston. I'm against it. Bob said to me, how old is Jordan now? I said, 21. Bob said, oh, listening to you, I thought she was 12. Brought me right back, right? Like, because Bob knows my daughters. My daughters are grown. The oldest one married, got a grandbaby. My kid's grown. But what was it? Fear, man. It's fear. It's fear. It's not trusting God. She may be my daughter, but she belongs to God. I commend my children to God's care every day. I had to learn how to do all this. I mean, a lot of this taking a lot of time. 30 years up in here, a lot of this has taken me a long time. But thank God for this fellowship. Now I always tell my sponsees, I ain't got to take that long for you. If you don't want to, I'll share my experience with you. Maybe you get it rolling a little sooner than I did. We take it a day at a time. Lastly, we got sex relations. And all of us have said need an overhauling here. Basic tenet with that is we need God's guidance and direction in this area of our lives. We can take input from others, but everybody has issues in this area, right? So it gets me to look at relationships and answer some questions about where I was wrong. And I love how Bob always do the thing with the piece of paper about my part. It ain't about what was my part. Because if I got a part, that means you got a part. This ain't your inventory, this is my inventory. It asks me, where was I wrong? Not with my part, because that leaves the door open for me to rationalize and justify based on what you did. This is why I did what I did. Disregard entirely. Disregard entirely. So we got prayers there, right? And the way I do that is write down the names of these, and you don't have to write a name, give them a number. I ain't interested in the name. What I'm interested in is where you was wrong in answering these questions. And get those down on paper. And what always happens, and I have heard hundreds of fifth steps. By the time they get to the third one, they realize they're reading the same thing over and over again, right? There's a clear pattern that will develop in this, right? A clear pattern, okay? So now we got something to work with, right? We got something to work with. We need God's guidance. I cannot compartmentalize my relationship with God and my recovery. Okay, God, you could have this here, but this over here, now, wait a minute, I'm slide that in my back pocket. See, I saw a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous when I came who could not maintain sobriety. And I asked an old-timer named Ed O. Ed been dead a long time now. I said, how come them guys sitting over there can't stay sober more than 18 months? He said, watch them after the meeting. Watch what they do after the meeting. And what they did after the meeting was pounce on the newcomer girls. Right? And most of these guys were married. Right? I've learned more in Alcoholics Anonymous by watching than anything else. Just watch. You want to see what works, you want to see what don't work, it's on display at every meeting that you go to. The people who do well here have some things in common, don't they? Sponsor others, home group, commitments, right? And they talk about a power in their life, a God of their understanding, right? So we commence the writing, and we answer those questions. All right. And one of the things that selfish, dishonest, and there are prayers, and I always use the last one on page 70, because it's kind of a synthesis of the rest of them. But where have we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and look at it. And I always talk about the pebble in the water with this thing. Whom have we harmed? Because oftentimes it's family, kids, there's a lot of people involved, right? Drop the pebble in the water, man, how far the ripples go. Take some time, do this. Get this stuff down on paper. There's a therapeutic value that occurs when you write something down. Because when you write it, it indelibly is etched inside your soul. You own it, you wrote it. It ain't Bob writing down Kent's character defects. It's Kent who wrote that stuff down. And so I need to see that, because later on I need to make it right. Later on I need to make it right. So we got this prayer. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. And so what I tell guys that are new, who are having trouble detaching themselves from unhealthy people and unhealthy situations, what are you willing to do? Well, you said you was willing to go to any length. Okay, go over to the detox. Okay, go over to the men's house and watch what happens. Did it when I was new. By the time you leave there, you forget what you was thinking about. I cannot stay sober and live dirty. I can't live like that no more. I can't carry that guilt and that shame that breeds in me fear, restlessness, irritability, discontent. I drink. It gives us clear-cut directions. And I ain't getting into step 6 and step 7 stuff, but this crap of, well, that's just the way I am, and all this crap. What length am I willing to go to? And it is my responsibility as a sponsor to direct them to these directions. It's up to them to do it. Either do it or you don't do it. I tell them all the time, you're going to be an example up in here. You're either going to be a good one or you're going to be a bad one, but we'll be watching. So we got prayers, right? God, this is a sick person. Please save me from being angry. How can I be helpful? Thy will be done. We ask God to remove our fears and direct our attention what he would have us be. And once we commence to outgrow fear. So in all 3 areas of my life, I now have prayer and action. Prayer and action, right? Am I using them? I know about them, but am I actually using them? Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrong. Right? God already knows, but he want to hear from me. So I do that. And I took it and I got on my knees. I read the inventory after I got done. And I asked for God's forgiveness, guidance, and direction. I thanked him for his forgiveness, but God already had forgiven me, but I didn't know that at the time. And I sat down with my sponsor and I came clean. I've written situational inventories since the first big one. Those have been done with Bob, but that first big one, every time I shared something with Bill, he would share with me. And we had a bond, and some of you guys know, because I know Bob had it with Dick. There's a bond that's created. My first sponsor had Parkinson's, and he lost the ability to speak. And I was living in Las Vegas then, and he was still able to talk a little bit before I left. And I told him that I was moving to Las Vegas, and Bob was going to be my sponsor. And he said, that is good. You have to have somebody close to you right now. That is good. And so they told me he was in hospice. So I flew back to Ohio, And I sat in his hospice room, me and him, he looking at me and I'm looking at him. And he couldn't speak. And we talked. That man knew. I did not hold nothing back in my inventory. That man knew everything about me. And he loved me unconditionally. He got a piece of paper and he wrote, and he could hardly write, "Do you remember the first time I had you do Big Book?" He used to do Big Book around the country, and he did a workshop in Ohio, and he told me to set it up. I said, "I don't know how." He said, "First, find me a place." So I found a place, held about 300 people. Cabins, real nice, right on Lake Erie. He said, "That's a good place." He says, "Now we'll go, we'll sit down with those people, we'll make the contract." So we did that. We got in the car, he looked at me, he said, "Did you see how I did that?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Now you need a registration committee." So I got some people together who had done it before, some people I knew up around Cleveland. They took that over. The thing sold out in about 3 weeks. So we got there Friday night. We're sitting in his cabin. And he says, "Is everything ready?" It's 7:45. It starts at 8. And I said, "Yes, sir. Everybody's here, registered. Everybody's been fed, ready to go. They're waiting on you." He looked at me and he said, "You'll begin with the doctor's opinion." And I said, "These people here from Canada, from Kentucky." I said, "These people didn't come to hear me. They came to, your name is on it." He said, "You'll begin with the doctor's opinion." It took me like that, right? We sat. How did I feel after the fifth step? Right? The book talks about, holding nothing back, illuminating every dark cranny from the past. After the fifth step is the first time that I felt like a real member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was the first time. For a long time, the first 3 months, I was just a visitor, an observer. Then I got busy and I got into the steps when I got sponsorship. And I used to envy and really dislike the people who came into the meetings and talked about fifth steps and haven't done all that. And I did. I secretly, I was jealous. Because there was something about them. There's something about the way they shared that was clean. I'm looking for words, but it was clean. Do you follow what I'm saying? And I envied that because you could sense it, you could see it, you could hear it. So I went down to the club Friday and I told somebody, you don't ever tell people nothing in LA in AA if you don't want everybody to know about it. But I told somebody, I'm doing my fifth step tomorrow. So I went and did my fifth step Saturday. And Sunday morning, I come down to morning meeting, and all of those people who I envied was lined up when I came in the door, and they all hugged me. Didn't say nothing. It was the first time I really in here felt like a member of AA. And like I was here to stay. All that take it to the grave stuff, And I do that with my sponsees. It's a back and forth thing. Because I need to know I'm not alone. And I need to know somebody loves me. I need to know God loves me. It was an unbelievable experience. And as I say, it created a lifetime bond. And he died, he was 53 years old when Bill died. When Neil died, he was 59. Kenny died, he was 51. And these cats sponsored the entire northern Ohio, and I ain't joking. And what powerful examples of how this thing works. The fifth step. Bill Wilson used to say, we got to stop living alone. We got to stop living alone, man. This self-imposed, self-created prison that I've built for myself. A terminal uniqueness, we used to call it. Nobody understands me. Nobody's done what I've done. Nobody's felt what I felt. Man, the freedom from the fifth step, and you know there's the fifth step promises in there, right? But looking the world in the eye instead of walking around looking at everybody's shoes. I knew what everybody's shoes in AA looked like for a long time. Because I couldn't look you in the eye. I was still too ashamed. Just an explosion of inner freedom. And I know that that's the grace of God. I'm removing those things that are blocking me. I'm feeling better. People are saying stuff. You know how they say stuff to you like you look different? Well, not to me, I don't, but other people see it, right? And that's as this grace begins to enter my life because I'm removing the things that have been blocking me from the sunlight of the Spirit. But there's a whole lot more that need to happen, right? Steps 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's going to be going on today. God bless you. Thank you.